What do you think of Derek Chauvin getting 22.5 years? Stupid Lively said. Better than Amber Guicher getting 10, she'll serve 5, and a hug and a Bible from the judge at the end of the trial for entering somebody else's apartment and shooting him dead while he was eating ice cream. Bailey the Nerd said. I think that's about what I expected. More than he would have gotten had it not been a massive spectacle of a case with huge societal pressure. But less than people want because they don't understand sentencing and the difference between first and second-degree murder. Seems appropriate to me. Literary Butterfly said. I know someone who got 50 years as a teen for holding up strangers with a BB gun for a stick of gum. No one was hurt, nothing of value was stolen, no prior record, just stupid teenagers doing something they shouldn't have done. 50 years. They're nearing 40 years old now and still in prison. If a judge could put them in prison for 50 years for stealing a stick of gum with a BB gun, despite even the people who they held up trying to keep them from getting more than a slap on the wrist, it has nothing to do with the difference between first and second-degree murder. Edit. I was wrong, guys. There was a lot more to this story than I was ever told, if the court documents are fully truthful. To clarify. 1. This person was a teenager but not a minor. 2. The BB gun was not the only gun, there was a real 1. 2. 3. They took more than gum, a wallet, some cash. 4. It was gang-related. Everything else is accurate. I'm sorry, I was wrong, but I do still believe that a videotaped murder tops the crime they committed in which the stolen items were minuscule in value and no one was hurt. Literary Butterfly said. Removed my original response to write this. I have only ever heard this story from my parents, her parents, and my brother, who was a friend of hers, who also happened to be present when she was arrested, but not for the crimes which were a different day. I just decided to look on Find Law for the case information from the Court of Appeals. It was a lot worse than they'd made it out to be, according to the court docs. Parts of the story were true, but many parts were omitted in what I was always told. I think they genuinely believe it was only as bad as they've ever told me because for some parents it's difficult to accept the way their kids turn out and the things their kids are capable of. On one hand, it sucks to have found out this way, but on the other I can't help but wonder if either story is wholly true. Nonetheless, I was wrong. Thanks you Dire Dog for prompting me to look for myself. Ada, it does happen all the time though that people of color are ridiculously overcharged for petty crimes. So while I was partially misinformed, my point stands. Agitated Noob 279 said. I think it's sad that so many thought that the worst was going to happen, and mostly because of how many times this has happened, where a racist police officer killed a black individual and merely got a slap on the wrist. It is frankly so sad that without one hell of an uprising, it is likely justice would not have been served. And my God, the amount of times before the sentencing that I heard someone say they didn't believe that justice would be served just like almost all the other times. I truly think that the only reason we got justice was because of videos and protests. Our country was built to be better than that. Agitated Noob 279 said. First-degree murder is where an individual either commits felony murder or premeditated the killing. Second degree is when someone kills in an unplanned attack, in the heat of the moment, or killed someone in a reckless disregard for human life. Obviously, it would have been very hard for Chauvin to have planned such a murder, and it is very likely he killed Floyd in the moment. A Great Big Goose said. Anything less is a crime in and of itself. Spider-Man said it best, with great power comes great responsibility. I think we all agree that the police need power to function, otherwise the law becomes meaningless. But we now see what happens when that power goes unchecked. We give cops ultimate power, they should be held to ultimate responsibility. Even the people who protect us and help us need to be beholden to someone, or something, other than themselves. This has the potential to be a step towards that end. We should embrace it. Old Daisy May said. He may not have set out that day to kill someone but he did, and for that he should spend the rest of his natural life in prison. I only saw the 9-minute video for the first time when it was shown in court and like everyone else I was paralyzed with shock and disgust at this man's actions. What infuriated me and made me shout at my TV screen was that I am sure I saw him bear down, i.e. put more weight on George's neck several times. Now this was hardly mentioned. I think the very young witness brought it up but nothing more was really said about it. Now I'm in the UK and obviously the laws are different over here, but surely if you do something with intent that changes the classification from second degree to first degree. I wasn't on Reddit when the case was ongoing, so I'm not sure if this has been discussed much, but it looks like to me he deliberately puts extra weight onto George's neck. So he deserves life? Shaft 6969 said. I agree that there were times it seemed like he increased pressure or dug down harder. His hand in pocket the whole time also looked like he was using his hand to press down even further. I believe it would have been impossible to prove, though, and raising the argument could have backfired against the prosecution. Because then, every tiny movement away could have also been posed as trying to relieve the pressure. I'm reasonably satisfied with the results of the trial and sentencing. I believe he displayed a complete disregard of human life that resulted in a death that he should have and could have avoided. He deserves to be deemed a murderer and be punished accordingly. Thankfully, this is happening. Lambori said. He didn't get a fair trial. That is something everyone should be concerned with, because if you're ever in that position, you would want a fair trial. It doesn't matter how angry you were about what happened or whether he was a cop or not. Everyone deserves a fair trial and not one where you're tried by public opinion. Take a minute to think about it beyond the 9-minute video. It sucks for everyone involved. The public and politicians need to stay out of it. At the end of the day, I believe the judge handed down a reasonable sentence that was free from bias or pressure. Accept it for what it is. It's time to move on. Disillusioned 217 said. Good riddance. When he gets out, he'll be a 67-and-a-half-year-old man with no relevant skills, qualifications, or connections. His wife already divorced him, too. He will have nothing and no one. Plus, he'll be released in the year 2043. Can you imagine what the world will look like then? I can't. He'll be totally unable to adapt. He'll be miserable, and he'll never stop thinking about how much better his life would have been if he just hadn't killed a man for no reason. INFJ Scorpio said. I spent 23 years working in corrections. 95% of people incarcerated will be released back into society at some point. The average life sentence is actually about 20 years. The structure of the sentence matters substantially. The minimum required number of years in a sentence structure is what it really boils down to. Usually a 22.5-year sentence means he has to serve a large portion of the sentence before he is even considered for parole. His life will be a living hell. There is a high probability he will attempt or commit suicide in a few years. People that really want to kill themselves will wait until the risk appears low as time goes on. MME LaRue said. Well, the state sentencing recommendations for second-degree murder call for 10-15 years, and with the aggravating factors he could have gotten as high as 30, 22 and change is far more than he would have gotten had the outrage not reached the point it did. Is it enough, though? He'll probably spend in PC, but he'll be at least 60 before the state can decide on his freedom. And he still has a date with federal prosecutors over the civil rights violations. I don't think he'll ever see unobstructed daylight ever again. Literary Butterfly said. Honestly, can't say I'm surprised, but I think it's nowhere near enough time. A close family friend's teenage daughter got 50 for some joke they played on strangers with a BB gun to get a stick of gum. They were teens, didn't hurt anyone, didn't take anything of value. Just thought it would be funny to hold up strangers with an obviously fake gun for a piece of gum. I'm not condoning their actions at all, but they got 50 years. She got more than twice the prison time over a BB gun and a stick of gum than this man got for murdering someone on video. Really hard to not think it's a race thing when the injustices are so blaringly obvious. Melancholy Bastard said. I'm late to this, but I don't agree with the American prison system. Even when I consider a person to be guilty of a crime of this magnitude. Fuck this dude, Akab, but I can't endorse the American prison system on occasion just because it suits me a little more in certain cases. I'm glad officers are being held accountable, but I will never find joy in the perpetuation of our horrible system. Edit. Yes, I'm American. Twin Fanbeer said. Capital punishment is an outdated relic and is not an option that should be used in civilized society. On the one hand, if you execute a potentially innocent person, you can never take that back. On the other hand, people that did do it should be made to live out their natural lives with what they've done weighing on their conscience. Lee Dungeon Master said. 1. I was referring to the fact that he had no motive for murder. Some say he was racist, but looking into his past, he's never shown any signs, and people don't just wake up racist one morning. In the full footage, you see that Chauvin was trying to help Floyd at the start of the footage. 2. The camera angle made it look like he was on the neck, but as pointed out in court, at more clear angles it could be seen as him being on George Floyd's upper back. Also, what he was using was a less harmful form of restraint. If you had intent to kill someone, you wouldn't do that. Not to mention, just because something is touching the neck doesn't mean it was blocking off oxygen, kinda like certain chokeholds. Heck, some dudes did a reenactment where they put someone heavier, Chauvin was lighter than Floyd, on someone's neck on concrete and they could only describe it as uncomfortable. 3. George Floyd had enough fentanyl in him to kill a horse, and how much he was acting up, it wouldn't be surprised if that was what killed him. An example is a story of a guy who got crazy high on drugs and ran through the snow in his underwear acting hysterical, then all in just a few seconds, his body shut down and died. Not to mention George Floyd had oxygen in his system, just about impossible to have that if you died of lack of oxygen. May I also mention that there were no injuries marks on Floyd's neck that show he was strangled. Lee Dungeon Master said. Finally, the best argument against Chauvin that at least challenges the idea that he is guilty of manslaughter is that he should have noticed Floyd was dying. But that's when I point out that there was a crowd threatening Chauvin, so he had to direct his attention to likely threats that could sneak attack him. The only place where Chauvin took a wrong move in this encounter was being nice to Floyd. Specifically, granting George Floyd's wish to be put on the ground. If George Floyd was simply thrown in the car, then the encounter would have gone better in so many directions, whether it be in benefit of Chauvin, Floyd, and all the parts of the world that got caught up in the summer riots.